business, technology, security and infrastructure, energy and development, transport and logistics. Today, I have the distinct pleasure and honor to welcome Ms. Cleopatra Kitti, the founder of the Mediterranean Growth Initiative, here at Prime Analysis. My name is Dr. Marios Efthymiopoulos. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Strategy International, and this is Prime Analysis. Dear Ms. Kitti, thank you very much for coming at another web series of Strategy International.
Thank you for inviting me. Professor Efthymiopoulos, you're doing a great job in bringing these issues to the forefront, our region, and the relevance of business and politics to the broader world.
Thank you very much for your kind words, and we do hope that you're going to enjoy this discussion that we very much looked forward into, because I know that you are a very bright person. You have done an extensive professional work in a variety of countries. And, Prime Analysis is one of our series at Strategy International, where the idea is to bring some of the most prestigious people that have the acquaintance on the dimensions of variety of things that are happening at the same time. And lately, as we were going to see, a lot of things are happening at the same time. So a way of start for us is to actually talk about your life. How did we manage to come down to today's world, in today's events are happening, where Cleopatra, the young Cleopatra, had dreams and a vision on how to be at the world? What role would Cleopatra have in a much changed world after that?
Yeah, it's an interesting story. Born and raised in Cyprus, having a loving family, went to school, both a gymnasium and the English school, back in the 80s. Then studies abroad. I focused on communications and business. And then started my life and my career here. Mid 30s, life changed, and with my son and my second husband, traveled abroad. And that's where the change in career and mindset happened, because our first posting was Turkey in '96. So learning to live in the enemy country during the time of EMEA, with very tense relations in the region, was life-changing. Have made a lot of friends, and changed my perspective.
And in Turkey, tell us, you've been in Turkey.
I've been in Turkey a couple of times in my life. The first was in '96. It was a family move there, and I was not able to work. I was not a European citizen. Cyprus was not a member of the EU. But I was a mother and a corporate wife with a big social circle. I was embraced very warmly by Turkish friends who are lifelong friends today. But I also lived to understand a bigger world out there. And then my career and my life evolved out of Turkey. We moved to Greece, to Holland, to Brussels, where I went back to school. I believe in lifelong learning. Actually, my career evolved as my lifelong learning evolved. So did an intensive program on how Europe regulates European institutional relations. And that's how the second iteration of my career started with APCO Worldwide. I was with them for 13 years. Out of Brussels for 7 years there. We moved to London, capital markets, doing work a lot on mergers, acquisitions, but also large transactions between regions and countries, global business. And from there, moved back to Greece, where my career again evolved. I was a regional managing director for Europe, Middle East, Africa. So consider me a Cypriot global nomad.
Very good. Your specialty is mergers and acquisitions and financial?
No, my specialty today, after more than 35 or 40 years in business, I think I would touch on governance, sort of looking at how public, private, family-owned businesses create value.
Right.
It's about understanding risk and opportunity through the lens of data and analysis.
Right.
And that's where the Mediterranean Growth Initiative comes in
In
to
the
that.
perspective, yeah. But we'll come back to the Mediterranean.
And its communications and its reputation and its the ability to tell a story about a transaction, a government to government project, big investments, but also where civil society, business, politics interact.
Right.
So it's a multifaceted.
I
don't fit in a box.
No, that's the idea. But I think we both fit in that box, if there is a box on this one, which really it complements. Knowing you also off camera for a bit of while, and the ideas that you have, the experiences that you have are exactly the ones that are needed today. And I'm going to go through every single sector that I said in the beginning: business, technology, security. I'm going to go into all of this because it's exactly why professional people like you are very much needed, especially in this period of time, in this convergence or divergence of interest, if I may say, in a regional or global perspective. Your experiences, as you said, they shaped you. They made you a global citizen. They made you understand different perspectives and different standards. And I want to go, if you want, a bit on how do you envision Cyprus then versus today? And maybe, because we are at the level of forecasting, and I know that in the family business and all these elements, when you see data, you also forecast possibilities and options, especially in finance, opportunities, investment, and so on. How do you see, first of all, the economic and business environment of Cyprus and the periphery?
Yeah, so just before I get into that, to say that I lived also for 10 years in the Gulf region and set up a business there, but also embedded myself in the culture.
Can I ask which country?
So I was in Dubai, Abu Dhabi, Ras Al Khaimah, but also opened up businesses in Saudi, in Qatar, and the entire region. I mean, lived and worked there, but also did business in Africa, India.
In years of change, by the way.
In years of change and in a decade. And that builds to my point on Cyprus.
Right.
So Cyprus was always an extrovert economy, whether
Indeed.
it was because we sold our tourist product, so attracted incoming tourists, but also the services sector. It's a services economy.
Right.
We don't produce, we don't manufacture. We are a services, so we are very open to deal with different cultures, to communicate and embrace different cultures. I mean, I think Cyprus today, compared to what it was when I left in the early 90s, today is a multicultural society. We talk about a bicommunal problem,
but we're now multicultural.
But we are a multicultural.
True, indeed.
Society.
Especially latest years, considering also the volatility of the regions and the incoming of people, investments, and so on and so forth. Yeah. Plus, it's the entrance of the EU.
Exactly. So that was a milestone. Like 74 or 64 or the 60s was a milestone. 70s were a milestone. I think getting into the EU in early 2000 was a significant milestone. And that was a big turning point.
That was my question coming. Do you think that the EU has actually helped us shape a global Cyprus, if I can call that?
I think it helped us put boundaries or frameworks of more of creating value in a collective way. So we are members of a very big family. being the last isolated, infrastructure-wise, country of the EU. We are an island economy. We continue to think like islanders, isolated islanders, but in an extrovert way, which is unique. I mean, maybe the Maltese have that capability, but being also in the eastern, most southeastern.
Yeah, the proximity with the Middle East and the Gulf countries is far easier. I mean, first of all, it's 1 hour and a half extra on air time, assuming that you're in the air, to go to mainland Europe, starting, let's say, with Greece. The second thing is, when they come to Cyprus, they see that, as you said, multicultural environment. And a lot of people have Cyprus as a hub, whether to stay or whether to operate from Cyprus into Europe.
Correct. And also, not just Europe, but regionally.
The region.
I think the vision should be a bit more embracing, resolving the issues with our big neighbor in the north, Turkey, and becoming a hub for the wider region.
That's in the business world too.
So mentally, you politically, culturally.
As a reason to conflict resolution, let's say.
Correct. I think the future can only be that.
Right.
I think conflict limits potential.
To be honest, due to proximity of Cyprus to Turkey, assuming that Cyprus has been reunited the way that it should be under the Republic of Cyprus, then I guess the business world is wide open for the region, including Turkey. The problem, however, in this case is not so much whether Turkey can actually do business, whether actually Turkey, by the time it is solved, can be an actual safeguarded partner, considering that its actions lately, especially in the Middle East, don't really project stability or the willingness to acknowledge the two sides, meaning Cyprus, and be acknowledged, and therefore saying that like in the EU, it doesn't matter what sort of size you are, it's an equal partner to the EU, and that is a total failure of the political situation of Turkey, understanding that it doesn't matter, the size doesn't matter. What matters is the proximity and the value of doing business. And actually, I also believe that Turkey has more incentives to have Cyprus as a hub, the Republic of Cyprus, obviously, as a hub, especially for doing business in the Middle East. But that's in a unique world. The reality, however, is that Cyprus now, 50 years on, with the unresolved, unlawful division of the island, has taken choices and has blossomed, as you said earlier, its global perspective, starting with the periphery and the region. Now, knowing that and you're with your physical presence and your experience in those countries, what do you think may be one of the most important elements with regards to business? Is it infrastructure? Is it main works? Is it energy? Or do we take it pillar by pillar?
Well, if we look at interconnectivity, and I go to the Mediterranean Growth Initiative, and the reason why I founded it, it's its 10-year anniversary this year. Doing work internationally, I realized that the Mediterranean is the least connected region in the world. So if we look at how China deploys Southeast Asia in its interconnectivity of markets, investments, infrastructure, manufacturing, it's one large region. If we look at how North America embeds South America in its infrastructure,
the logistics, the
manufacturing,
hub, the strategic decision, yes.
Is another big area. We are Europe's front line to Africa, but this potential remains untapped. In the 10 years we are tracking the interconnectivity of the Mediterranean region, we see that it has not moved an inch. We are 500 million people producing 10% of global GDP, but only a quarter of our trade is intra-regional.
That's not good.
This makes us very weak. We are a number of very
Is it because we're European affiliated in the sense that we turned our attention to Europe in making our infrastructure, or is it just because it just happened?
Well, we are a very diverse region in the sense that we have North Africa, we have the Levant, we have the rim of the Balkan rim, we have Turkey, we have the South Mediterranean rim. It's a very diverse culturally, but not historically diverse. Our history is very much embedded in each other. Our trade in the ancient times was very much the Mediterranean remains a conduit area from east to west and from west to east.
Right.
But between us, we haven't managed to leverage the strengths of our markets and make it a bigger market. So we are 22, 21 or 23 markets that are very siloed. I think the change has come with the EU's electricity market.
Right. So that's one infrastructure.
That's one infrastructure that is supposed to build more connectivity with the Southern Rim with the North African Rim. Eastern Mediterranean is least connected if you look at Central Mediterranean and Western Mediterranean.
And also on the internet as well. There are only two lines, let's say, with Israel, for example, and one line with Syria.
So there is potential. And I think the Mediterranean with the, let's say, conflicts subsiding or peace prevailing in the Levantine region, hopefully between Cyprus and Turkey, hopefully between our North African neighbors, where we will see a major reconstruction era.
Do the charts
institutions will be remodeled.
And that's
borders will be remodeled.
Right.
According to different allegiances that we see reshaping. So I think if we look ahead, we are in an era of reshaping geographically, institutionally, and reconstructing the potential of the region for a bit more collaboration than what we have right now.
Correct me if I'm wrong, and major attention was shifted into Cyprus the moment that Cyprus announced the utility of its exclusive economic zone, namely with regards to oil and gas. And later on, the gas exploration, the agreements with Egypt, liquidated gas, but also the opportunity then emerged with Israel. And I guess then the interconnector started, also the importance of the interconnector. But as you correctly put, this opened a wide, open other steps and opportunities, considering that both sides are stepping in with strategic relationship, with operational directives, and so on and so forth. What do you have to say about energy? I mean, we started with one infrastructure element, which is the energy place. But what about, I mean, it's an alternative energy, obviously, but what about oil and gas?
So I think one important point to note is that the regional collaboration started because private capital invested to explore the potential of the region. So you might remember then Noble Energy, which was a mid-sized oil and gas company
Based
from the
Texas,
US,
right?
invested in the Israeli and Cypriot acreage or EEZ to identify pockets of gas. And it was only then that governments were encouraged. So a business or private capital took the risk, and it was in that risk framework that governments began to develop the policy or the political agreements that would allow more private capital to come to the region. Egypt had by then explored a lot of its reserves. Egypt was a pioneer, let's say, in the Eastern Mediterranean.
But it had not resolved its exclusive economic zone with Greece at that time.
It hadn't, so it was very domestic.
It was
domestic.
In nearby its borders, mainland borders.
So there is significant potential regionally, which is, I think, work in progress.
But it attracted also Qatar Petroleum, if I'm correct.
I mean, Cyprus has a very diverse international footprint of companies that have a lens on the region. So companies never, or corporate capital, wants to, and that's where the Mediterranean Growth Initiative again plays a role, because we want to tell the story of the potential of the region from a lens of the data
From the local community
and the analysis, because there is no visibility from the region outwards to big capital markets what the potential is. An investor comes to a region because it needs to build scale. It needs to be scalable. It needs to be connecting the dots. It needs to understand the risk it's taking.
Of course.
So the analysis that we have so far, or the pots, let's say, of data or investments, are very country specific. Somebody needs to look at the region and look at its potential. And I think that's where we're seeing change. Because we need to build scalability, we need to build infrastructure that interconnects the markets, we need institutional agreements, countries between and amongst themselves to collaborate. So we are in a work in progress.
I'm wondering something that I always had as a question. I mean, I was kind of involved with the Geostrategic Committee at that time when President Anastasiadis was there. I was always wondering, the Energy Committee, why, for example, Saudi Aramco was not involved, or why ADNOC was not involved into this. But then you had Qatar Petroleum.
In collaboration with another international,
they had subcontractors.
US
they have subcontractors.
Major.
You have ExxonMobil as well, and so on. But that's another question of others, the current ones that were. But why not also others? What was the scale of thought behind it?
Possibly we were not on the radar, or the potential was not adequately expressed or explained to meet the interests of these big international actors from the Gulf region. But I think this is not the end of the story. I mean, we see synergies between the majors. We see different collaborations in different parts of the region.
ENI had partners. Total had partners.
Everybody has partners, because the risk needs to be shared.
Of course.
Where the opportunity needs to be shared.
Because the Mediterranean is also a deep sea as well. I mean, we have the tendency to forget that geologically.
But also the Mediterranean touches on North Africa. Lots of potential there. Sub-Saharan Africa.
And also the Straits, Suez Canal, and so on.
Of course. And then more to the Middle East, the routes from the Caucasus into the Middle East, into the Balkans. So there is a big untapped potential in this region to connect all the other energy regions in the world.
Let me just go a bit more global. You were in the UK. You've done your own share of experiences in London. How does London see this part of the world, not only Cyprus and this part of the world, considering that London is a global hub. It's an important hub. It's a major hub. It's a partner in the development. Everything goes also through London. And vis-a-vis, if you want, the Americans, and also I'm just going to divert a bit into the political discussion, the upcoming of a new elected president who comes with a fairly different political agenda than Joe Biden was used to.
So I'll go back to the first part of your question, which was the UK.
Sure.
Where the UK has historic relationships with this region from its colonial past. I think London will remain, or the UK will remain a big trade actor. I think it's still adjusting itself to the post-Brexit world. But I think the UK, and the signals I read, is that it will rely on its Commonwealth alliances to build a new trade scale for its businesses and its future.
It relies on. I mean, we saw lately the president of the Republic of Cyprus visited England, which was a historical moment.
Well,
An
England
important one.
remains a guarantor power to Cyprus's.
But the actual visit of the leader
Alright,
of
yes,
Cyprus
correct.
to the UK gives, if you want, what you just said, that the Commonwealth, at least the way that the British may think, may have a pivotal role into the decision making overall, which actually has an impact into the regional approaches on business, among others.
Correct. I think the British foreign policy understands this region and the wider Middle East region extensively, both through its defense and security structures, but also through its trade. I think we see trade and security moving in tandem. I think President-elect Trump understands the binary relationship between trade and security in a very transactional way.
It's a very good word you use, binary relationship. I'm going to quote you on this, by the way. But this binary relationship is also what my fear is, that it's only understood by global. I'm not going to say globalists, because it diverges into a political discussion, but a global mind such as yours, because the embedding of business with security, defense, politics, technology, and so on, that cycle, if you want, of things, is only handled by very few people. And it seems that Joe Biden didn't do that. He was trying to find diplomatic solutions. It was no coincidence that Secretary of State Blinken was going left and right all the time. He was always constantly in many countries trying to figure out some solutions. But Trump is coming heavily on the business element, and that business obviously is a bit differentiated, because he wants people to invest into the U.S. Has a very interesting way of saying that. Either you do this, or I put sanctions, or I put, I will say, tariffs, not sanctions. I'm mistaken, but tariffs. And I keep the sanctions to the bad people as long as I negotiate with them, and then I can lift the sanctions.
Well, it's his negotiating style, but I wouldn't criticize. What I would say is that President Biden's style was the more traditional, diplomatic, institutional way of doing business. So it was in a mold that was the known. I think President Trump and the choice of the people he has appointed to do things signals the unknown, the unconventional, not by the book. He writes his own book of rules. So it's about the unexpected, the transactional.
Is it a bad thing or a good thing, you think? In terms of business, if you want to keep stability, you have stability. But if you want to do pioneer, you try your book, right?
I think what President Trump's election signifies is that we, or the people that elected him, they want to see an unraveling of the traditional, the known, because it hasn't served, it has created possibly more of the inequality. Capital markets are working differently. There's a different way of financing tools. The unconventional way is signified also through Bitcoin, the cryptos. So the world of capital is changing.
It was coming.
Right. The societal rifts are very evident in a lot of countries because of inequality. So I think what people are saying, and we see this in Europe too, they want to shake the tree. The question is, how much do we protect shaking the tree by keeping to certain rules that protect our institutions, our democracies, rule of law, because we don't want to be in the rule of the jungle, where the strongest eat the weakest, or if you are not an aggressor, you don't survive. We live in a multifaceted world, an interconnected world. We want to have certain rules of multilateralism that dictate.
Who's going to make these rules?
But this is it. If leadership or America being the leader or the hegemon of the world that they want to be, they have to stick to certain principles, the principles of reciprocity, but not, the principles
No,
of
the ethical
rule of law.
acceptance, the rule of law, as you said,
Ethics,
the diplomatic ways, the
some
protocols,
fairness,
some equality in the discussion and
some
decision.
quality,
And
meritocracy. There needs to be something on which we can base
so we're actually,
collaboration.
As Europeans, we're actually afraid of what is coming, you think? Or is it because maybe Trump, considering his first presidency, is now more mature? As an example, what I want to say mature is the following. If you remember, he did the Space Force. And he wanted, if you remember back then, to invest into space. And suddenly he has Elon Musk. Now, Elon Musk has unfolded a very politically oriented understanding, and he's trying to make, to put, if you want, opinions there, what he thinks, and probably investigate somehow the reaction. Probably he's a front man in seeing what's going to happen. But and I think that leads us to something that we had discussed prior. It seems that Trump and Elon Musk have agreed on something that will initially probably pivot within the US, but probably also outside, considering what Elon Musk is doing lately, especially with his announcements, his statements, and so on politics. And you just mentioned it, and that is called governance. What do you think on governance overall? I know it's huge, because you have governance Chinese, you have governance Russian, you have governance of the Gulf, you have governance in Latin America, in North America, and so on. And what do you think of governance in the European perspective? And then I'm going to come down to Cyprus, and from Cyprus to its periphery.
So governance implies certain values, shared values, a shared understanding. It implies speaking the unspoken. It implies certain common understanding of risk and opportunity.
Right.
So if you are a board of a company, you define your risk profile or your risk appetite, and you can see how the dots connect to create value through understanding the opportunity. So risk and opportunity.
Right.
There are givers and takers in the world. I think this is what is being redrawn. I think for business, it's very important to understand this risk appetite. I see for the first time that, for example, the European Central Bank is asking its regulated systemic banks to look at the risk of geopolitics in defining risk, because volatility is
there every day.
is there, but it needs to be managed in a very different way, because the rule book of Mr. Trump tells differently to what it was the conventional way of running countries. So this unconventional rule book will need to be reflected in both capital commitments. Where is the risk? Where is the opportunity? It also determines how boards, whether public or countries or governments, or decide to define or frame risk and opportunity. So you need, as a board member or a cabinet minister or a president of a country,
to see all the dimensions.
You need to understand what you see and is evident, but what also you don't see and is not evident. So what are the known unknowns?
That's a risk assessment 101, let's say.
Right. So what are the known unknowns, and where are the unknown unknowns on a daily basis?
Is there, I'm sorry I'm stopping on government, but it's so interesting, our discussion. I want us to keep in mind that in the end of the discussion, I would like you to, if possible, to make a financial risk assessment considering the geopolitics. That's why I was stopping you. But do you think that governance also will have an implication to those that are controlling, if you want, the financial aspects of global trade agreements or banking systems. We see in not only in Cyprus or in Greece, we see in Europe and in the Middle East as well, mergers and acquisitions. And we see sudden ones. And we see also conglomerates. We see a lot of investment firms. We see private or public investment firms rising more capital. We recently saw Damac, for example, claiming to invest 20 billion euros into the United States for data centers and other related technological aspects. So is it also a governance level? Are those who are going to lead in the governance and the financial governance institutions are going to be the ones who will understand the linguistics, let's say, or the skills or that new book that Trump is writing?
So from a financial perspective, I think President-elect Trump has indicated that he will relax the rules on which financial institutions take risk.
Right.
This implies risk for all the rest of us, the everyday.
And if you're not strong enough.
And if you don't understand how money works, then your risk is higher than before. So for the everyday person, it implies more rigor into our financial literacy, how we manage our money. The same goes for businesses. It implies more rigor in understanding how to raise debt, how much debt is sustainable,
Inflation,
where are you taking your investment opportunities, what are the risks, and it's not just the regulatory risk, it's a geopolitical risk, it's a financial risk, it's a societal risk, it's a socioeconomic risk. So it means Mr. Damac has assessed that taking the risk of committing this multi-billion-dollar investment
but in a specific
in data centers in the US,
in a specific industry though, not anything.
It means they have done that assessment, and they have a high risk appetite on which to base capital. The interesting thing is, where will he raise this 20 million? Is it debt driven? Is it equity driven?
Right.
Is it using his own money or his shareholders' money? Or
he's
is
just announcing?
Or he's raising debt from public markets, from private equity? I mean,
if he's raising market from debt, then we're in trouble.
Well, it depends
in the long term.
Well, there is debt that is sustainable. It means how much the debt is costing, and if the return on his investment is higher than the cost of debt, it means it's an interesting proposition. But it's these types of questions that both we as citizens as well as investors or countries need to look deeper at. What are the metrics of risk? What are the metrics of opportunity?
Absolutely.
What is my risk appetite?
Very, very true. I'll come back to governance. And I'll say why. Because you just combined in my thought, what is the role of the Eastern Hemisphere? Gold has moved into the eastern parts. You have more billionaires and millionaires in China than you have in the US. You have the rising stars of South Asia. And you have a lot of problems also with that, especially with trades, with global trade, and so on and so forth. What's the role of these countries? And again, I want to come back to a proportion of the question we didn't ask. What's the role of Cyprus into all of this, considering global trade, logistics, global trade, and probably strategic agreements, which have on the back end, as you understand, business agreements?
The big discussion that we've always held was whether globalization was in demise. It's morphing. So the role of the East, we will see more regional tight interconnectedness in the same way as we will see in the West. So global trade will depend more on regional sufficiency, regional adequacy, regional infrastructure, because culturally, countries in one region can understand each other and have proximity to raw materials and infrastructure and production and distribution and value chains. So I think we will see a regionalization of global trade. So regions will be able to trade with other regions more than just
conflict resolution.
Coming
I
to
mean,
our
if
region,
I take Philippines, for example, what's happening in the Philippines or the relationship with China in this case, Philippines managed before with the previous president to have a bit balance between the U.S. and China because it was competing suddenly. But in order to have more regionalization, I'm not taking the Middle East because you just said it earlier. Then the Middle East, in order to do business, you have to have resolution of conflict. So the same thing applies in those areas. So you think we're going to see more?
I think we will see more middle countries becoming more or smaller and middle countries
More adequate.
navigating the relationship with each other a bit more diplomatically. Because we rely first and foremost, and I think this is a lesson also for Israel, because Israel's satellite economy to the US, but it needs its region.
It's too far, you say?
Well, I think it needs its region to find peace, but it also needs its region to
Strategic
collaborate with, because it cannot only be
Yeah, of course.
the US.
Needs strategic partners.
And that's where energy, infrastructure, technology. I mean,
But they're
we're
exporting all the time. But I understand how you're saying it. But I guess strategic proximity.
we need strategic proximity, and we need collaboration in our immediate region, whether we are in Asia or whether we are in the US or whether we are in Europe. I think Europe did well in developing its north and its east, but it hasn't done well in developing its south and its Middle Eastern, let's say, regional collaboration. So I think the EU needs to put some more time and resources.
What about Cyprus?
So Cyprus is at a key, has always been this sort of key geography that connects both culturally, intellectually, physically, the region of the Middle East and the West, or the East and the West. Cyprus has the opportunity, and I think it's tapping into it, of being a home for...
Or can it be a host?
A home, a host.
Everything.
I think Cyprus needs to resolve its issue with Turkey, and Turkey needs to resolve its issue with Cyprus.
What if Turkey does not resolve it, and then we have no other option but to develop as we are developing lately, especially with the West, with Israel?
I think we should always create the space for some collaboration.
Of course.
I think we do.
Number one rule of trade, right?
Right. And I think Turkey has more to benefit, especially within the EU-Turkey relations, to resolve the Cyprus issue.
Yeah, because without the resolution, there is no entrance to the EU. I mean, at the end of the day, if we want to politicize this issue. But
I go back to regionalization.
Yes, please.
So I think we still have our region as an untapped potential. Cyprus can play a role in convening this dynamic region. I mean, we see our relations with the Arab countries, our relations with Israel, our relations with the European fellow member states. We should continue to do more of that, and we should interconnect more with Europe as we interconnect more with our region.
Dear Ms. Kitti, considering the time frame that we want to discuss, and knowing that we can discuss for hours, and this is the format of Prime Analysis, where we are attempting to put as much as information as possible. I would like to ask you a last question, which I know you're very familiar. You have all the knowledge through either the Mediterranean Growth Initiative or other positions that you're currently holding. Everything that you said on infrastructure, on business, on development, on defense, on security, even in diplomacy and resolution, requires strong financial institutions. For me, a political economy level, let's say, is really important. Where do you envision, if you want, the future, let's say, banking sector, I would say, investment sector, I would say, private equity, private business? Where do you see the financial? Is there a financial constraint, or are we going to see even more blossoming elements? It seems that Cyprus is one of the emerging economies, but if I'm allowed a bit to criticize, I'm I'm lacking major works or major milestone, at least in that level. Where do you see this? At least, let's say in the financial or the banking sector. Where do you see this? Are we talking about growth? Are we talking about inflation? I mean, there was a Draghi report that came out that was really pessimistic. What do you think
I
will
think
take place?
for me, Mario Draghi's report was a bit. It was very significant. First of all, the message is that what worked in the past will not work for now and the future.
Yes.
So his key message was that we need to re-engineer how Europe does its business. Overregulation could be too much overregulation, but also how capital is used to fuel growth. New sectors, reskilling, new possibilities of greening the economy, but not killing the economy as we green it. I think he was sending certain messages. So to me, what worked in the past cannot work for today and the future. The second thing that I wanted to point out is that Cyprus is we're lucky to be a very small market. I
More
see,
controllable.
yes, but I still see a lot of structural inequalities in the Cypriot economy itself. So we are lucky because we have incoming business, let's say, flows, because countries in our region need us to be a stable place. So a lot of people relocate, companies relocate, they relocate their people. That's how we drive our growth. But the fundamentals of the Cypriot economy, we have a big public sector where it's funded by an even smaller private sector. That's a structural inequality. We have pay gaps in different sectors of the economy. So we have to fix these things. We have to fix the efficiency. We have to fix whether there is corruption to eliminate it, where there is flaws in institutions to strengthen them.
Right.
Cyprus has work to do. But I think the world is changing. Finance is changing. We have fintechs entering the space of banks. We have private capital markets, private money, private equity money that competes with the role of the banks.
Really?
The banks need to change. Their role will change, I see. So we are in a moment of transition.
Right. We never said anything about FDIs. But I also guess that FDIs also matter, but as long as they're major infrastructure.
With FDIs, foreign direct investments, take different shapes and forms depending on the profile of the country or the region.
What is the profile? What is the profile of Cyprus in this case, do you think? Or what should it be?
We are a services economy. So any FDI will have to do with providing more efficiency to the services sector. It's not about real estate. It's about infrastructure. It's about interconnectivity. It's about ports, roads. Ports and airports.
And we're lacking
it's about efficiency of technology. It's about it's a lot of new things.
But we're lacking, I think, on this. It shows that FDIs. I saw somewhere in a statistic. I don't know if it was the World Bank or Statista, that it was going minus on FDIs on infrastructure.
It depends also how you measure, what data you use. So the politics of data is another big topic. And I've learned through building the Mediterranean Growth Initiative, always working with experts like Alma Economics that run and power the platform. By the way, mgi.online is an open access platform.
I've been watching it. It's quite interesting and very, very important also for us as a think tank, I think. And that convergence, I think that discussion is really important on the financial investment sector.
So how our countries collect data, report data, the frequency, the quality, the integrity of data. That's another thing that impacts governance, in the sense that you make decisions based on the best information you get. And the way that data analytics is changing decision-making processes, or AI is changing decision-making processes, is another big topic we can discuss any other time.
And I think, having said that, and leading into a conclusion, I make an open-ended, if you want, invitation that I think we should organize something like this, an event where these things should be discussed in a round table, maybe more open with key people, because this is the reason why we set up Strategy International, to be able to have some of the best minds of Cyprus, global citizens and regional citizens, to be able to understand and forecast, maybe understand and risk assess together these elements, exactly because we need data. The more we create data, the more we create information, everything will lead us into better solutions and options in policy crafting.
Correct.
Dear Ms. Kitti, thank you very much for coming into our discussion today. I really enjoyed it. This was one of my most interesting discussions, considering the dimensions that we covered in a very short time. As I said, the format of Strategy International is as such, and Prime Analysis as such, that we want this dimensionality to come about. Thank you very much for coming.
I thank you for inviting me.
Thank you. Thank you all for watching another web series of Prime Analysis. Please like, share, subscribe, and follow into our YouTube channel and social media. My name is Dr. Marios Efthymiopoulos. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Strategy International. And remember, impact makes a difference.